Where is my mind? Where is my mind? Where is mine?
Hi, abnormal psychology students. In this video lecture, I'm going to share the complicated and comorbid case history and treatment work with a 24-year-old European-American heterosexual male. He originally sought therapy to address issues related to his sexual relationships. He reported being in a committed relationship with a woman and having a disappointing sex life. He stated that he occasionally becomes, in his words, hyper and obsessed with pursuing sexual encounters with prostitutes and men advertising on Craigslist. He stated that he had twice engaged in such sexual behavior after consuming alcohol, and that this has affected the trust in his relationship. He noted that he is unsure whether this behavior is driven by sexual desire, by drug use, by mania, or some other factor. Now, this client's case history is filled with instability and crisis. He stated that he was in and out of foster homes for a period of time during his childhood. During his adolescence, he stated that he vacillated between houselessness and living with his mother and brothers in rentals. During this time, he said that his older brother committed suicide and stated that shortly afterwards he himself became heavily involved in drugs, most notably using ecstasy, and at one time was a dealer. He reported engaging in non-fatal suicidal behavior during this period, including an episode where he, in his words, had to be talked out of jumping off a roof. So, during the course of therapy, he exhibited manic and depressive symptoms of bipolar 1. So he reported that he was currently not using drugs, so it's unlikely that these mood episodes were drug-induced. When manic, he said he demonstrated his pressured speech, and sometimes in session it'd be nearly impossible to even jump in and interject or contribute to the conversation because of the volume and the speed of his speech. He also didn't sleep for 3 and 4 days at a time. He went into the backcountry alone for 2 nights, and he had no gear and hadn't told anybody of his plans or whereabouts. And he also sought out those impulsive sexual encounters, mostly from online advertisements. When he was in a depressive episode, he expressed feelings of sadness, worthlessness, and hopelessness. He reported suicidal ideation, but no suicidal behaviors. And in sessions, he would be withdrawn, uncommunicative, he would be unable to make eye contact, and he seemed really apathetic. So as you can see, S needed a lot of support across a variety of issues. These were the symptoms of bipolar disorder, his drug use, his history of trauma, his relationship concerns, and those are only naming a few. So he and I had several broad therapeutic goals, and these included establishing an authentic and affirming relationship where he could challenge his beliefs that he was unlovable, that he was disgusting, that he was an object to be used, and some of those beliefs came from his traumatic experiences in childhood. A second goal was to cultivate positive emotions in his life, and we looked to his strengths to do so. This is pulling from positive psychology. He was highly creative and used writing as a way to feel very positive about himself, as well as to express his emotions and describe his experience. Third goal was deepened emotional expression, and this really was for the purpose of trauma processing and improving interpersonal relationships and connections. And fourth, we worked on harm reduction, specifically during the manic and depressive episodes. Most of our work was through individual therapy, and he also joined a dialectical behavior therapy group that I had been facilitating. And my client was absolutely adamant that he would not take medication for any of his symptoms, so the biological medical route was not something we pursued. The therapy techniques that seemed to be most effective were positive regard, interpersonal feedback, emotion regulation and distress tolerance skills, both from the dialectical behavior therapy model, suicide checks, and a monthly mood chart for tracking manic and depressive symptoms, as well as their precedence. Now, positive regard and interpersonal feedback both built trust, safety, and a deep connection between me and my client, all of which had been missing from most of his previous relationships. So these served to be some corrective experiences for him. The DBT skills allowed us to focus on effective coping during crises. And a part of this included harm reduction for his impulsive behaviors. And one example here is for him to basically carry condoms in all of his personal belongings. It would be his wallet, jacket, backpack, all around his apartment. And this was so that when he was in a manic state and perhaps engaging in those impulsive sexual encounters, it was really easy for him to be safe. That's the idea of harm reduction. So we haven't ended the behavior, but we're trying to reduce the possibility that the behavior is really detrimental and harmful. Okay. The monthly mood chart, another therapeutic technique that we did, allowed for my client to observe his moods and the behaviors that surrounded them to try to identify some patterns so that we could learn maybe what precipitated a manic episode or what precipitated a depressive episode or what precipitated balance, because he did experience some balance. He wasn't rapidly cycling. Unfortunately, like many short-term therapies, this story does not neatly tie up. My client was in the process of developing and implementing his DBT skills, so those emotion regulation skills and some distress tolerance skills, when he decided to withdraw from university, and that effectively ended his ability to pursue therapy at the counseling center. Now, was his withdrawal linked to some of the struggles, particularly some of his bipolar struggles? I'm not sure, and I wish that I could end this story in a neater way or in a way that perhaps seems more hopeful. But as you're maybe learning already, and for those of you who are going into therapy, you'll see that that's not always the case. As therapists, we get to be in our clients' lives for some period of time. Sometimes we get to see some resolution, and other times we're just in there during a crisis period or some other point of time, and we hope that we've sown some seeds for health and well-being later on. Thanks for listening.